So I'm here with an important video with some features on the FX9. It's a bit late. I apologize. I'm a bit late to the party on this. I've been very busy on productions, which has been great considering the beginning of this year with lockdown being slow or no work. So been very thankful to have a ton of work and being too busy to create any YouTube content. But I wanted to go into this video quickly and do a quick one on the update for the FX9, for the firmware update that's been out for a while now and I've been using for a while. But there's a couple few little tricks that I've learned with this that have made a big difference for us on the way that we're filming some stuff and the way that we're using the camera. One of the first things is, and what a lot of people were excited about, is the ability to shoot 5K slow-mo. So doing that little punch in the sensor, being able to do the 5K slow-mo, so it's not the 6K sensor, not the full frame, a little bit cropped in, but being able to do that slow-mo instead of having to go into a Super 35 crop. What happens when you start doing the 5K crop and you're doing 60 frames per second and you set that up for your S&Q on the camera so you could hit that and switch over to 60 frames per second? Well, one of the awesome features that I've talked about with this camera is the autofocus, and when you do that, you lose your ability for autofocus. When it does slow-mo with S&Q, this camera does not allow for any autofocus. But the little trick is that if you set your base setting to 60 frames per second, okay? So if I go into here, so we go in here and I'm gonna say, what is my record format? And you have that change from 23 to 24. If you're shooting 24, 29, or 23, what you do is you change that to actually be 29.94, okay? So then all your footage is actually gonna be shot at natively 60 frames per second. So when you bring it back into your computer and you watch it back, it plays not slow-mo. You just need to go in and conform that to 24, 23, 987, whatever you want to have your base final thing as, but then you can do slow motion with autofocus. And for us, for a bunch of things that we're doing, for a bunch of B-roll that we're doing, this has been great because the autofocus has really helped in a lot of things and sped up a lot of work, especially when we're going out now as a very small crew or no crew because of the coronavirus. This has really helped for things like that. So there's times when we want to be able to shoot that slow motion and have the flexibility in post to make it slow motion or not slow motion. And the great thing when you're doing it that way too, you're still capturing sound. You're still capturing sound to the camera. So you have that, soundtrack, that audio that you might want to use for some background audio. With your slow motion. Now what I've done is I've updated my custom settings that you can load to your SD card. I did another video about, I'm going to link up here for you guys. I've updated that. You can go to Dropbox, the link I have in the description. You can re-download those, put them onto an SD card. And what I've done is I've kind of taken all the things that I think are the best ones that I like to use, and settings on the camera. I go more into that in that video. But also, if I look here, I go over to this, and this is what I found the quickest way to switch between these different things. So if I go to all frame here, and then I go load from SD, I have named all these files in here. So I have stuff that says Cine EI, which is Cine EI full frame, meaning Cine EI 60 frames. So if I need that wider shot, a little bit more space over the 5K, or I'm doing an interview, that's kind of the thing I'm going to be shooting in. If I want to quickly switch over, do some B-roll that is with 60 frames, 5K with autofocus, I'm picking the second one. If I want to do it so I can be doing 5K and toggle between the S and Q, then I have the third one. And then if I want to be doing the 2K sensor, it's a full frame 2K sensor read in 180 frames per second. For some real slow-mo, it's a 1080p image that comes out of it, but I can do that as well. They're all the same flavors of the color, Cine EI, and I've done the same thing below that in s-cinetone. So we have all those things loaded there. And this is, I found, the quickest way to switch between things. Now, why I did 180 is I just wanted to go straight to the top thing on this, the max speed. If I want to really shoot some slow-mo that way, that's what I'd be shooting at. And then if I want to tweak it down to 120, that's a very quick thing. But you can see here what it does. I go execute. It's going to start bringing that in, and it will reboot the camera. In some cases, it's not. Oh, yes, sorry, it is rebooting the camera. Takes a few seconds, but again, this is the quickest way to do it. Then going to the menu, finding that stuff, changing that. There we go. It is ready to go at 180 frames per second. Now, one of the other updates that has happened to this camera, and I'm going to try to show you guys on the screen here, I'll get closer on it for you, is the touch screen. Okay, so the touch screen ability on the camera, it's not as great as I was hoping it to be. It's not as simple as you can just touch on the screen anywhere and things will show up for you. Okay, that's not happening. There's you have to be in a certain setting for to see that. So what you have to be in is into the going on the side of your camera here, hitting the status bar. When you get into the status kind of window here, that is when the touch screen is enabled for things you can change here. So we're going to go through different things on here. You know, you can change your ISO, you can change your frame rates, all these things. It's great. It works well. But as I said, it doesn't work just, you know, as simply as touching anywhere here. Now also turn off the S and Q here so you can go back into some slow motion. It also works for if you want to do your flexible spot on your autofocus, then you can use that and you can move that around with your fingers. But again, I was a little bit disappointed. I wish that, you know, I have to go over to the flexible spot to do that. I wish it would work as well as the touchscreen works on the back of the Sony DSLRs, and you can actually hit some of the other functions and stuff in there and change things. This, you have to go into the status menu, or you have to be in the flexible spot to be changing your stuff for the autofocus. Okay, so one other thing to really note on the new firmware update, or the firmware update, that the newest firmware update is not as new anymore, it's a couple months out, for the FX9, is the ability to shoot 24 frames per second, not 23.98, no drop frame, what the camera was limited to before. Now you can actually shoot native 24 frames per second. Now for me, this isn't a huge deal because there is some limitations within that. When you go to S&Q, whether you're in 5K mode or you're in 2K mode, you can't do the same slow motion when you're shooting native 24 frames per second. You can go up to 30 frames per second. So not really a ton, not a huge deal, and a little bit disappointing for me. I don't know why that is not an option with that, but you know, for me, I'm not going to be shooting 24 frames per second really for projects. In the native 24, I'll be shooting a lot of 23.98. And as I was talking about before, I'll be shooting a lot of my B-roll and have been shooting a lot of my B-roll at 60 frames per second native in the 5K mode with autofocus. So thanks so much, guys, for watching this video. If there is something I missed, if there's some problems with the firmware update or things that you wish Sony has done, please leave that in the comments below. The comments are great. It's a great way for us to interact and discuss different things. And please, guys, if you could give me a thumbs up if you liked the video, if you could subscribe to the channel, all that stuff really does help. We'll see you guys on the next video.